So my first question is, could you introduce yourself briefly, clubs where you worked, etc., your background, study background, etc.
hmm Perfect. Well, just to keep it simple, I come from Croatia, and over there we have uh, University of Zagreb and also University of Split as two main places where you can study sports science. In Croatia, it's called School of Kinesiology, but actually it's like physical education and sports science. And I studied in Zagreb. I did my exchange studies in Slovakia and Sweden, so I had a little bit of international experience doing Erasmus programs and mainly meeting new people and new cultures, and obviously getting a little bit of education also over there. And beside that formal education in Croatia, I also studied my PhD in Spain when I used to work with Baskonia. And from the background of my profession, which is being a physical performance coach, mainly in basketball in the last 10 years, I worked with four different teams in Croatia and four different teams internationally. In Croatia, it was junior team of Basketball Club Zagreb. It was very, very good, uh, promising and senior team of Croatia, national basketball team. And then internationally, I worked with Turk Telekom, Baskonia in Spain, Unix Kazan, and most recently, Bayern Munich.
Okay, a lot of experience around the world and a lot of team. It's good to that you've worked with young players and professional team, so you have the all vision. So it will be it's interesting. And today we will talk about the core training. And
Mhm.
my first question for you is, can you define the core and explain why it's so important in basketball?
Mhm, mhm. Well, when we look anatomically, the core is the center of the body. I mean, that's the meaning of the word, right? Everything around the belly and the low back spine, right? But when we look functionally, what we consider as core, especially if we follow philosophies and approaches of coaches like Mike Boyle, that was big influence on me during my early career and later on. We cannot just look at a soft part of torso as the core. Maybe we have to look a little bit higher and lower, because a lot of muscles attach to the hips, and they all attach to the spine. So sometimes we can define core as everything below shoulders and above knees, right? Because, for example, when we make a sprint, maybe doctors, especially Dr. Magnus, will help the hip to extend, right? So they will be a synergist for extending the hip. But if we perform an exercise like a step up or a lunge, then some of the muscles in such as adductors change their role, and they help in hip control and hip stability, especially from shifting hips left and right. So even though we might think that the core is only the low back, actually everything that helps stabilize low back and control hips, also stabilize the hips, uh, can be considered as core. So for me, it's all about controlling the center of the body, and whatever helps can be defined as the core.
Okay, so it's not just abs and back muscles. It's all muscles um, in on hips and shoulder too. Do you consider that core shoulder muscles, rotator cuff, are is also a core training or not?
well, we cannot say that shoulder muscles and especially like rotator cuffs are core. That's not the core, but everything below shoulders, starting already like from the pecs and below, especially diaphragm, if we see like the top of the cylinder, okay, but since diaphragm attaches to the sternum, okay, and pecs also attached to the sternum, everything from this region and below can be considered as core. And then if we look at the bottom of the cylinder, those are the pelvic floor muscles. But as I said previously, pelvic floor muscles are not the only muscles attaching to the hips. And in various exercises, we have muscles that attach to hips and provide stability to the hips, even though in this stability mobility concept, we look at the hip mobility, right? We are still looking for hip control and hip stability, especially avoiding the lateral shifts in hips when we do lunges, when we sprint, even when we move sideways, right?
Okay, so when in your book you wrote about the development from the center to the periphery, um, it's considered all core training and also quads and hamstring training into this principle.
Well, it is for me, like when I wrote the book, I didn't focus, like when we talk about stability, of course, the core itself is the center. It's and then we move towards periphery, because when we talk about stability, core stability in basketball can be developed in this basic way when we focus only on the core. But we need to integrate the core with the rest of the body, with the movement of extremities, because the patterns that we develop and how different muscles act in different motions is very important on how we provide stability to the core. I gave you the example with adductors in lunging position and in sprinting, and maybe in some other positions on the court, like, I don't know, static fight under the basket is very, in parallel feet is very different from lunging forward to pass the ball or to sprint. Okay, so of course, our major focus when it comes to stability is not developing strength and power in hamstrings and quads, because this is more like strength and power training. But we have to understand and we have to know that the more the movement is complex, meaning, for example, it's very different from holding a squat position to making a basketball layup. Okay, we need to understand that in order to provide stability to the core, we need to know how the whole body acts, and we need to understand a little bit better movement mechanics, and also how these muscles act and interact between each other, and how they fire, if they fire on time, and so on.
Yeah, I see. And what kind of exercises do you use to develop this core stability? Do you prefer some exercises? And what progression stages? Uh, because you had young athletes and young team and professional player. Do you do the same exercises with all or not?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, when it comes to developing core stability, there are some, I like to simplify things, and they can always be more complex, but I like to differentiate a little bit three different approaches, three different methods on developing core. And I think they are all important for athletes, especially for basketball players. There is this voluntary stability training, anticipatory training, that is a perturbation where player expects that there is going to be a perturbation. Okay, there will be force applied to their body, and they know that this force is coming to hit the body and affect the body. And then there is the final level of core stability. It's reactive stability. So it's something that player does not expect, and it's unexpected perturbation. And every level has its place in the core and stability training of basketball players, regardless of the level. Okay, youth players or senior players. Okay, um, maybe because of the nature of basketball game, and basketball game is played with a lot of contact, a lot of expected and unexpected contact. Maybe youth players, because they don't have so much experience by playing basketball, maybe they need to work a little bit more on these anticipatory and reactive um, exercises. Okay, and this is more performance based because basketball is a contact sport, and expected and unexpected perturbations is something that we want in our training in order to somehow help the player to perform better. Okay, but if we go step back to the voluntary stability, that's the stability training where we are trying to achieve stability in a very controlled environment. And some of the examples can be plank holds, glute bridge holds, and those kind of exercises that are very simple, but on the other side, very popular to use. And it's not about exercise, it's about the goal of training and what you want to achieve. Okay. And when it comes to voluntary exercises, to me, of course, they can be somehow performance related, okay, but not to be too philosophical. If I have to differentiate what is a little bit more performance based and what is more health based, then definitely anticipatory and reactive stability is more towards performance side because it moves you towards direction of nature of basketball game, a lot of contact, a lot of changes of direction, a lot of agility, okay. And on the other side, you have voluntary stability training that is more health oriented, okay, to have proper endurance of back muscles, okay, to work on their strength and firing pattern. It depends what kind of exercises you use, but normally it's more like health related, okay. So plank can be an exercise and it can be a test. If you position a player in a plank position and he can hold a good alignment for only 30 seconds, then I think we have a problem. Now, you can, as a coach, you can set a standard that youth players need to spend at least 2 minutes, like let's say under 16, 2 minutes in a good plank position. Juniors 3 minutes and seniors 4 minutes. Okay, but we know definitely that if you, regardless of the level, if you cannot keep plank position for at least a minute, potentially you are more prone towards low back issues because the endurance, the isometric contraction endurance of your back muscles and your core muscles is pretty poor. So this is something that we are looking for, and that's why it's related more towards health, because we are also looking what happens with those muscles that keep the spine stable and in place in the fourth quarter of the game when players are tired. So we need to bring some endurance towards that region in order to also provide stability. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's mandatory to go to achieve the first step to move to all the plank during 2 or 3 minutes, and after you do the work, anticipatory and reactivity core. Not
Exactly.
yeah. So okay, and
I mean, I'm
um
saying that when you have a player that holds plank for 30 seconds, his core training, especially if we talk about core training before strength session, core training before he goes to play basketball. It's not like I'm not going to do any anticipatory and reactive exercises before we build 2 minutes plank, because we need to prepare him for expected and unexpected perturbations. The only thing is that if I have players with poor voluntary stability, that's going to be our main concern. It's going to be our 50, 60, 70% of core stability training until we reach a new level. And then maybe this ratio between the amount of voluntary, anticipatory, and reactive exercises will change. So what we have, we are like DJs having 3 buttons, and then we have to increase and decrease the amount of these kind of exercises, because we always want to keep some voluntary exercises for health, but of course we want to amplify a lot the expected and unexpected perturbation exercises.
Yes. So even on for professional players, you always do voluntary core.
Yes, because it's health related, okay? And I believe that it can really keep players away, not completely, but it can definitely help with chronic low back pain, especially that chronic low back pain comes from insufficient strength and endurance. I'm not talking about bulging disc or some kind of neurological problems. I'm talking only about insufficient strength and endurance.
Yeah. So you have the 3 categories and you adjust for the level of players and what he needs.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
when focusing on core, we often work on isometrics and tend to do a lot of reps. Would it be interesting to do this workout with heavier loads and fewer reps, like 3 to 5? Isolate rectus abdominis exercises, planks with loads, crunch with cable, but high loads. Is it interesting?
Yes, we just have to know what we are trying to achieve. One thing is to add more load towards the isometric environment. So, for example, if we do plank with a plate on our shoulders and on our back, this is not adding. It's just adding more gravity on the like more force on the body. Okay, so it is adding load, but it's just playing with the laws of gravity. So we are making it harder, but it can be done also if someone just puts hands on you and holds his hands, and this is a little bit more force that you need to control, but there is still no movement. If we talk about adding more load towards exercises like abs, where you normally engage the movement, then normally what we are doing is we are trying to develop more concentric or eccentric concentric strength. Depends on what kind of movement you focus on. If you lie down on the floor and you just do concentric movement with a medicine ball, okay, and then you go back without medicine ball because you throw it to someone else, then maybe we are working more on strength and power of the movement, which is another aspect of strength and power training. And it's not so much oriented towards developing stability and control. It's more about producing a movement. And in the end, yes, we can talk that when you throw that medicine ball or you are at the end range, that you have this moment where you stop and stabilize everything. So it can be a little bit of stability involved in the end ranges. But normally our main focus is not the the stable position. It's more about making the move. Okay, so definitely one of the progressions in stability training is to add external load, and maybe by adding external load, it's we need more load we add, probably the less seconds we're going to spend during a certain set. Okay, if we do an isometric pull-off hold on a pulley, okay, if we add 5 kilos on the pulley, probably we're going to be able to hold that position for a couple of minutes. But if we add 50 kilos, okay, then definitely we're going to add more load to the movement, and it's going to be harder to hold it. So there's going to be also development of strength of those muscles. And in one way, if we repeat it in many different sets, that can definitely impact also the endurance of those muscles that are engaged in the movement. So I'm not going to say that there is the things like adding more load to the movement should be avoided or should be encouraged. There is always a place and time to add more load to the movement. The only question for me is, what are we really trying to achieve with adding more load to that movement? Okay, because if we have to change adding more load and we have to change the way we move, then maybe we're not achieving the same goal with that exercise. Okay, or if player needs to compensate. So for me, the whole point is you have to always know what you are doing and what is the outcome of the exercise.
Yeah, I know what you see. So I thought about for example, the rotation with pulley, rotation movement. These exercises, would it be interesting to do 3 reps, 3 to 5 reps each side, but with heavy loads, or it's more interesting to do with endurance work, like 10 to 15 reps?
I think there is a place to do both. The only question is how you engage your core and what happens with the hips. And if there is a lot of movement in the spine, I mean, spine will eventually move. The question is how you control it and what you're trying to achieve. Of course, you need core stability in 1 rep and in 100 reps. Okay, most probably, if you go 3 repetitions with heavier weights, probably what you're trying to achieve is to build a little bit more strength. If you go very heavy loads, okay, or you're gonna play with lighter loads, maybe, but you will look for power. Okay, so you will look at those prime movers of the core, like external, internal obliques, that also provide some stability to the core, but now they will be engaged in creating the motion, okay, and their big contraction will cause the body to move. So what we are trying to achieve is to train those prime movers to produce more strength and more power into the movement. Okay, while the smaller muscles that attach directly to the spine will not be in a position to develop more endurance because of the short reps, but definitely they will be engaged because they have to work. They have to activate before the prime movers so they can protect the spine first, because this is what body looks for the first. It needs to stabilize the spine. So deep core muscles need to activate first before you activate external layers of the core, okay, like abs and external internal obliques, okay, and especially before you start moving extremities. One good test that you can do is you can stand up, and with 2 or 3 fingers, top of the fingers, you can put it like on the low back, okay? And when you stand up, you just put your, okay, I can show you here. Like you take 2, 3 fingers and then you put your hips a little bit forward so
Mm.
you can see that kind of low back muscles deactivated, okay? And then you drop one arm and you go explosively lift the arm up. You will see immediately under your fingers how low back muscles activated before actually the arm movement happened, because this is what we are trying to achieve with stability training, that when the extremities start to move, that there is always a stability effect on the spine. So when we are trying to uh, do any core exercises or any extremity exercises, especially in a standing position, core stability will always be there. The question is only if we are targeting the core training with those exercises, or it's not so important
Mm.
in during that part of the training.
Okay, yeah, really interesting. And um, it's is it important to include non-specific positions like the plank in a player's workout, or should the player only focus on position specially used during a basketball game?
Mhm. Nice. That's a really good question, and I come back to having these two approaches: the health related and performance related. And if we look at the players and what they're able to do after being for 20, 25, 30, 35 years on their feet, they often lose the stability of the core and patterns that they had during their developmental phase as babies. So doing many exercises on the ground and doing different plank positions and especially different rolling patterns on the ground can be very beneficial to maintain or retrain, because we all trained enough, otherwise we would not be able to walk. Okay, the crawling patterns, the rolling patterns, those are basic movements that we had as babies and as kids, but often we don't spend much ground and much time on the ground later on in our stages as recreational athletes or as professional athletes. So for the health purposes, I like that players spend some time. If we look at the whole core concept, let's say at least 20% of the time. Now, if you believe that basketball game provides a lot of anticipatory and reactive stability, and you don't have to stress it in the weightlifting room so much, maybe 50, 60% of your core work will be, because of those reasons, will be done on the ground. Okay, in this primal movement patterns, doing some Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and if we simplify it, I like to do exercises like floor flips, where you have two players in doing in pairs. One is lying down on the floor, face up or face down, okay, and the other one tries to flip him. So there is a
Mm.
lot of uh, uh, anticipatory and reactive stability, because sometimes you expect that once he has hands on you, you know when he's going to try to flip you, but you don't know actually when he's going to change the grip. So it's a lot of anticipatory and reactive stability coming there, but it can also be something in between voluntary and anticipatory stability, where you do floor rolls by yourself. When you lie down on your back, you lift your legs up in the air like a baby, and then you start to roll to left and right, and you try to maintain the alignment between shoulders and hips. Okay, so if you start to roll, you want to roll simultaneously to left and right, okay, without being dissociated, like this. Okay, you want integrity in the spine and connection, good connection between hips and shoulders. So I think going back to the position, of course, for performance, it's very important. And this is when we talk about the integrity. We talk about core stability when the extremities start to move, when we start to move on the court, or when we start engaging our arms. And then you can also do some different progressions there, using both arms, alternate arms, using one arm. Okay, you can do position of your feet in parallel, in split feet, in narrow split feet, single leg, and so on. So there are different progressions that you can use, but once we stand up on our feet, then we definitely talk more about basketball, because basketball is played on your feet. So this is probably the position that is more performance oriented. But I will always, always, always go back to the ground uh, to teach players or retrain their skill to be stable on the ground in all of the methods, voluntary, anticipatory, and reactive, because it's health related and it's human performance related that we need to have as human beings.
Yeah, so all fight sports like judo or all on ground sports are interesting to basketball players.
Definitely, definitely,
Okay.
definitely. I like to do a lot of uh, exercises where you pull and push between each other, like controlled type of fight, normally with a firm grip without uh, changing the grip, because you don't want someone to get hit or poked in the eye. But for example, firm grip, and then wrestling in different positions on the ground, uh, half kneeling, kneeling position, standing in split feet. All these exercises are very welcome. For me, that's something that it's part of stability training, and it's very okay. It's maybe exaggerated type of contact, because in basketball it is a foul in the end when you start pushing and pulling player like that. But this is actually the extra law that we talked about. Okay, that they need to learn how to withstand these excessive forces that they have to control.
Yeah, and it's change and it's fun. So psychological aspect is also important.
Yes, definitely, definitely. The more fun there is behind exercises, for sure, it's gonna be better for players.
And my last question, you talked about reactive stability. You say a little bit exercises, but which others exercises do you use to develop this kind of work?
Mm-hmm. So for when it comes to voluntary, we mentioned planks, glute bridges. That's simple, right? When it comes to anticipatory exercises, something as simple as a dead bug, where we know that we're gonna uh, move our legs and arms. Doesn't matter if it's one or two at a time. We know that we're gonna make a little perturbation to our body, but we are trying to keep the right core stability and everything in place. Exercises like rollouts. Okay, I know that I'm gonna roll out faster or slower, doesn't matter, but I need to keep the proper alignment and stability in my core. Going from like regular plank, that it's more like voluntary exercise, to maybe shoulder touch. You know exactly what time you're gonna move your hand off of the floor, so you know when you need to react by yourself. Okay, but it is anticipatory type of exercise. Then chops and lifts, especially if you don't include a lot of rotation in the body, you are trying to maintain the core as stable as possible and rotate through your shoulders, through your T-spine, while low back and hips are under control. Those kind of exercises are good examples of anticipatory. And then the reactive, of course, we mentioned a lot of exercises in pairs where you don't know exactly when you need to react and maintain that position. So we mentioned, for example, floor flips. I like to use planks in pairs where a player walks around and pushes in different directions. Then we can have in standing position exercises that I like to call monument, where you try to keep the position of your body, and then player walks around you and tries to rotate your shoulders, try to push your hips left and right, push your knees, because we are looking for full body integrity. And if someone pushes your knee and your shoulder at the same time, how to make a proper alignment. And this is where the core training reaches its max. When you're trying to make a perturbation below and above core needs to stay stable. Okay. And then we can move on to some more functional type of exercises, like you can make a layup motion, and there can be someone pushing you and you try to maintain the alignment of the whole body. And this is core stability training with full body stability concept. And this is, I guess, regarding the position, something that is the most functional for basketball player.